Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're getting a chance to sit down with our very first international guest, Robert Degle of Evolve MMA. Robert is a brown belt under John Danaher's system, and we're really excited to talk to him today because we got tons of questions regarding jiu-jitsu, and we're going to get some amazing answers based off our discussion today. Before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. If you want to make sure that you're helping support the athletes, the coaches, and the guests that come onto the show, make sure you're liking and you're sharing. It'd be great, and we really do appreciate it. We have a special giveaway of a $100 gift card to Canadian Protein. All you need to do is be a subscriber and leave a comment on the video. We'll be announcing the winner after March the 1st, so make sure you keep an eye out. We are powered by Spirit Leaf Waterdown in Waterdown, Ontario, located at 64 Hamilton Street North. If you're looking for Canada's top cannabis, look no further than Alex and his crew at Spirit Leaf Waterdown. With his knowledgeable staff, you're going to be able to find all the THC CBD products of the highest qualities. Online curbside pickup is available, but also stores are open now. Don't forget to like our Instagram and their Instagram, and you'll save some money. We are also sponsored by Project X-Guard. Project X-Guard has been helping at-risk youth get connected with jiu-jitsu throughout the GTA and continue to do so. If you know anybody who would benefit from this gift of jiu-jitsu and make a difference in their life, make sure you contact us or Project X-Guard and help them get started with some amazing instructors. Thanks everybody, and enjoy the show.
Fuck Andrew Como. That's the first line. Never gonna happen.
Yeah. But yeah. Anyway, whenever you guys are ready, and I'm sure it should be good. Yeah.
Yeah. No. We're recording now. So, hey, I want to thank you very much for coming up on the podcast today. We do appreciate it. Before we get started, let's introduce yourself, like who you are. Let's tell you all about you.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. Okay. So my name is Robert Degle. I am a 29-year-old jiu-jitsu instructor. I trained under John Danaher. I currently am now in Singapore. I grew up in New York. It's funny. I was just watching some of the interviews with some of my teammates who are now in Puerto Rico, and Danaher and Craig were both saying like, yeah, everybody hated New York and we're glad we left. Not me. I like New York. I grew up there, and like it's home to me. And like I understand the complaints. Make no fucking mistake. They're all very valid. But for me, like the positives outweigh the negatives. To me, it's a place that I really, really like. Anyway. But so I was. A lot of people, they probably heard a little bit about this. I was studying philosophy before I switched to jiu-jitsu full time. My intention was to become a professor. But for a lot of reasons, I shifted to jiu-jitsu. I still love philosophy. I read it pretty actively, but jiu-jitsu is my focus. And I think there are major advantages to jiu-jitsu over a career in academic philosophy. That's, I guess, all there is to know. That's like the basics about me, I guess. Yeah, not all there is to know. Yeah.
So how did you go from like a philosophy background, and then like how do you even find jiu-jitsu as your kind of like go-to thing? Is this something that you wanted to do with your life?
Yeah, so I started grappling when I was 13. I started doing middle school wrestling. I wanted to do jiu-jitsu though. So basically what had happened was I was a pretty shy kid. I wasn't really very good at sports. I didn't like sports. I basically avoided them. I hated them. But as I started getting older, with my friends, we started doing, basically one of my friends got the brilliant idea of we should like have backyard UFC fights. He got like UFC gloves, and basically it was like there were no elbows, no kicks, no knees. It was just punches and grappling. And we literally would just go in my buddy's backyard and just like basically beat the shit out of each other. And I was getting my ass kicked because I was not athletic. So I was like, I need to figure out a way to overcome these guys using some kind of technique. And again, keep in mind, this was not like any violent this is just me and my buddies like fucking around. Like,
Yeah, it's like you and every other person, like basically doing that.
I think everybody who's listened to this at some point has been guilty of just like,
yeah.
hey man, bro, let's do some UFC in the backyard, bro.
It was stupid, you know, in hindsight. Like, I've thought about it, like, now that I'm older, it's like, we were not wearing mouth guards. We could have, like, gotten hurt. But, like, nobody really got hurt, which is funny. Because none of us really knew what we were doing, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And I watched a couple jiu-jitsu videos on YouTube, and I started watching UFC so I could start to learn, like, what can I do technically to win? And I had a little, like, I watched, like, very beginner level stuff, and that stuff was working on my buddies. So I was like, oh, okay. Like I remember I went against one of my friends who was way more athletic than me, and I got his back and I put on a rear naked, and I was like, wow, okay, that like really worked. And so I was like, I want to learn jiu-jitsu now, but I was 13. I didn't have a job. So my parents weren't going to pay for it. So I found out that my high school, as most like American schools do, offered, middle school. I was in middle school still. I was in 8th grade. They offered wrestling. So I jumped on the wrestling team. And I did wrestling from 8th grade to 12th grade. But literally the whole time that I was doing wrestling, I was like, I really just wanted to be doing jiu-jitsu. I was trying to think about, like, as I was wrestling, I literally was doing stuff that I was like, well, I think this will translate well to jiu-jitsu. So for instance, I played a game that's called leg riding in jiu-jitsu. Leg riding is, in wrestling. Leg riding is basically like taking the back. It's just like back control in wrestling. And you use a power half to try to expose their back to the mat. You don't really pin people that way, but you get back points. It's really good for control. So I was literally playing it because I was like, well, it's sort of like back control, and I'll start to learn the mechanics of how back control functions. Not really. It's pretty different, but that was the idea, because I saw back control, and I was like, okay, the leg riding wrestling game is kind of, it looks like it. So maybe if I practice that, when I do eventually switch to jiu-jitsu, which is what my goal was, I will have some experience with it. And I guess kind of, maybe it did a little bit. But so then when I was in 12th grade, a senior in high school, I got a job working at a pizzeria, and then I was able to pay for actual jiu-jitsu. So that was once my senior season of wrestling ended. The week after it ended, I started jiu-jitsu right away. And so that's why I started jiu-jitsu. And philosophy was kind of like a totally separate thing, where like I just, like, there were two big influences on me in terms of what pushed me into philosophy. My mother had gone to school and had a lot of philosophy texts throughout the house. She didn't study philosophy that wasn't her major, but she went to a Jesuit school, which they require a lot of philosophy courses. And so I had those books in my house, and my uncle he teaches at Harvard, not philosophy, actually geology, but he had a lot of philosophy books, which he just was willing to just give me. So I read those. And he encouraged me a lot because I was interested in it from like a very young age, because I was just like very curious. Like, I asked a lot of questions, I just had I was constantly asking questions about the world. And at first I was more interested in science, but then as I became a teenager, it shifted more to philosophy. Interestingly enough, I think now I'm more interested in science than philosophy, but that's that's kind of how it goes. I guess sometimes your intellectual interests, fluctuate throughout your life. And, I was lucky that my high school offered a philosophy class. Most American high schools don't. I was very lucky that mine did. So I took a philosophy class my senior year of high school, and I was very interested in it. I was like, this is something that I kind of didn't really know I didn't really have anything I wanted to do with my life per se, like as a career. And I was like, well, I like this. This is very interesting to me. And I was like, maybe I can become a professor. So that's kind of what I almost was like, I just don't know what else to do. And I just happened to like it. And I felt like I remember when I was an undergraduate, I read on a forum once, this guy said, you should only pursue philosophy at a graduate level if it's the only thing that will ever make you happy. And for a while, I took that pretty seriously. So I was like, I thought it made sense, because the life of an academic philosopher is, in a lot of ways, it's pretty brutal. There are a lot of aspects to it which kind of suck, to be honest. Like, you don't have a lot of control over where you get to live, because professorships are so few and far between. So you have to basically accept anything you can get. And on top of that, you're always hustling to get tenure, trying to get papers published. And unfortunately, what a lot of people don't realize is getting papers published in philosophy, it isn't really always just about merit. Merit plays a role in it, of course, but because philosophy is, to some degree, there's some ambiguity about what's quality philosophy, right? Like if I just don't happen to agree with you, and it's like I don't think it's any good, it doesn't get published. So I was advised by certain professors that I studied under to like abandon some of my actual interests to write about things that I wasn't interested in, but happened to be popular at the time. So that was one of the things that turned me off from it, by the way, that I was like, what's the point of pursuing this if I have to write about stuff that isn't interesting to me? If the whole reason I'm pursuing this is because I love it, if I have to do parts of it that aren't interesting to me, why do it? Yeah. But I still, I happen to right near me where I'm seated, I have like 5 philosophy books. You know what I mean? So I will always love the discipline. I think there's real value to it. But the life of an academic philosopher, the life of a professor really appeals to me. Like I would have loved to have been a professor, but it's tough to get to that point. It's tough to get to the point, what every young academic philosophy student envisions for themselves is really hard to get. And it's not all merit based, unfortunately. A lot of it's politics. A lot of it's, I had a professor who was a complete moron. This guy was a total idiot. And he would openly tell us he got his job because his parents were rich. I was like,
this is what I'm paying for with my university education.
Yeah, the guy, I actually dropped out of that class because I was like, this guy's a fucking idiot. Like I remember I asked the guy, I was like, what is the criteria that you're grading us on? And he wouldn't give me. I was like, I don't like ambiguity. I want specific measurable things. Like tell me what I have to do to get my grade. And he wouldn't fucking tell me. And I was like, okay, I'm going to drop your class. I'm not staying in your class because it's like, because what I was very concerned about was getting a 4.0 GPA. Because if you want to get into the best graduate schools, you need fucking everything's got to be perfect. So I was like, I was already at a disadvantage because I was going to like a poor person college. I went to the City University of New York, which is a public school, which is not like, it's not like a really great, when you're applying to grad schools, they see, oh, you're Queens College graduate. Okay. And it's not that impressive. So I felt like I was at a disadvantage already. So I was like, I wound up getting a 3.8, which I was like, fuck, this isn't good enough. I wanted to get a 4.0. And so I wanted to make sure every class I was like, look, I need to be on top of my grades, and at the same time, by the way, that I'm doing all this, I'm training under Danaher in the Blue Basement. So I'm training like every day with him. I'm going to these classes. I'm working. I had a job too. I was a assistant manager at a vitamin store. Awful fucking job. Yeah. And so it was like, I was never sleeping, but I actually look on those days as pretty happy because I was doing what I wanted pretty much every day. I was training jiu-jitsu and I was doing philosophy like pretty much every day. And I was working too, which sucked, but whatever. It was a shit job, but it was an easy job. So it was that.
I want to ask you about your philosophy experience and how that ties into jiu-jitsu and how you teach, or even just like learning jiu-jitsu. Have you found like there's like any parallels between like, what you're studying philosophy and what you're studying in jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, so there definitely are. Okay, basically, I think the biggest things I got from philosophy are how to look at problems, how to approach the topic of solving a problem. So a big thing in philosophy, an interesting thing about the topic of philosophy is that people in the discipline very rarely agree upon what we're doing. People are always arguing over what is philosophy, what are our goals. And that's it makes the discipline, there's a level of intense ambiguity to it. But what's really fascinating about it is it also trains you to, in my opinion, cut through the bullshit, so to speak, right? Because if you're, for instance, a physicist or a chemist or a geologist, I'm not trained in those fields, so I don't really know. But I think probably your goals are already there's less argument about what you're doing in the field, right? Like the work of the scientists in those fields is you're kind of working together to solve common problems. Whereas in philosophy, you are doing that, but there's little camps. And so there's always intense debate between the camps over which camp is approaching the topic in the correct way. So I was very interested in people like Ludwig Wittgenstein, and the American pragmatists. I would say those are like my two main areas. And I also really liked Chinese philosophy. So those are like my three main areas. They're all very related, actually. And I would approach problems in a certain way, and someone else would approach problems in a certain way. And I would have to argue for why we should look at it my way, right? And so now when I come into jiu-jitsu, it's somewhat similar in that people don't always necessarily agree on what are the problems we're trying to solve. You have so many different rule sets, right? So it's like there's argument in jiu-jitsu about what we should even really be trying to do, right? Like some people are like, well, it's all about the submission, right? Some people say, no, it's about winning at all costs. Some people say it's about entertainment. Some people say, I don't care about entertainment, I just want to win, right? And there's validity to all these claims, but now we got to parse through and see, no one's really, I don't think anyone's really right per se, but it's like you can look at the arguments and think about the problems. So I think that's the biggest thing philosophy equipped me to do very well, which is to identify problems in a clear way that cuts through bullshit. And now think about how to solve them, if that makes any sense.
So how do you kind of take your approach when you structure classes for teaching and cutting through the bullshit, as you were to say, and then obviously trying to get your point across, but breaking it down far enough where people can get what you're trying to expand upon?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is having a clear goal in mind. You've got to look and say, okay, there are a lot of different things I could do, right? You can, as a coach, work your athletes in many different directions, but you've got to identify, what am I trying to do? If my goal, let's just say hypothetically, my goal was to have a set of athletes that were the best in the world at arm locks, right? That could be a goal. And I work towards doing that deliberately through a period of a couple of years. Why am I doing that? What's the purpose towards doing that, right? I have to have short-term goals that build to long-term goals. And their goals have to be based on, basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to it's kind of, in some sense, it's guesswork based on research about what's going to help us to achieve our goals in the long term, right? So for instance, imagine if people can get better at anything they do long term consistently, they will get better at. So hypothetically, if I had my students work, let's say rubber guard for 6 months, they're going to get better at it. But the question is, would they have been better suited for doing that versus, let's say, working to pass guard for 6 months? Which of these is going to move us towards what our goals are in a more efficient way? And what another challenge to that is, what are our goals? If your goals are to win EBI, which doesn't exist anymore, but if it did, if your goal is to win EBI, combat jiu-jitsu, yeah, it's a different kind of different beast. If your goal is to win EBI, it's going to be different than if your goal is to win ADCC. So if I was to coach an athlete whose goal was to win an EBI tournament, man, it's a very different thing than ADCC. Some things are going to be in common. Certain things will always be shared. I think back control, that's kind of the big thing you're always going to see jiu-jitsu people need to be good at. But if you're training for EBI, why do you need to work takedowns? It's almost a total waste of your time. It's kind of stupid, in my opinion, to be working takedowns intensely. But man, if you're going to ADCC and you don't have takedowns, you're going to have a hard time. It changes. So my work as a coach, or I think any good coach's work, has to be about identifying the problems and then working in a very organized way to gain the proper skills to overcome those problems.
So when you kind of because you kind of touched on it, especially with rule sets and all that kind of stuff. In your opinion, what do you think is kind of the best rule set that's out there right now for competition?
Well, it's funny because I was asked this question maybe 8 months ago on a different podcast, and I gave a totally different answer than what I'm about to give. My opinion has changed a lot. Yeah.
My philosophy has changed.
Yeah.
In the last 8 months.
That's how things work, right?
Right. Exactly. Yes.
You've updated your thesis.
Yeah. It's funny. People were I say that because I don't want people to hear what I'm about to say, but you said this on a different podcast. Yeah, well, because I've changed my mind. That's how it happens.
You're allowed to do that. It's a fucking
Yes.
guy fucking lied to us 8 months ago. What the fuck?
Yeah. So I would say ADCC, actually. ADCC rules. With the exception of, the only thing I don't like is I don't like in the finals match how they add, if you pull guard, you get a negative at any point of the match. I wish that the finals were the same rules as the rest of the tournament. I don't see what benefit that adds. But the reason why I like ADCC is because what I think it does is it strikes a really good balance between allowing creative, like submission style grappling and also encouraging positional grappling. Because in ADCC, the reality is submissions, positions, and takedowns are all super important. So on the ground, the two biggest parts of ground grappling are submissions and positions. And standing grappling, you got submissions too, but it's mainly about takedowns, I would say. The art of putting a man down to his hips. And ADCC does a really good job of encouraging all of these skills. Like these are I would probably say the three main skill areas of grappling, submissions, positions, and takedowns. And ADCC does a really good job of encouraging all of them. The reason why, 8 months ago, I said, I think Kasai rules, and I still love Kasai rules. But I think that ADCC, I still think Kasai, like I said, they're fantastic rules. But I think ADCC, the big difference is ADCC matches are longer. That's the big issue with Kasai. The rule set's fantastic, but man, the matches are so fucking short. So I think that ADCC edges it out because of that. I think both rule sets do a good job encouraging all of the main skill areas, but ADCC, just by virtue of being longer, and they're different rule sets, but they're obviously ADCC, you got the no points period. But I think they both do a good job of pushing grapplers to develop skills in interesting ways. It's just the only thing that edges ADCC over Kasai, in my opinion, is the length of the matches. Yeah.
So then you would say okay, so your favorite one to watch is probably ADCC. Have you now talking competing for yourself? Have you competed in an ADCC rule set, submission only rule set? What are some ones that you've done, compete competition wise, and what have you liked and what have you wanted to change?
Well, so I've competed in every no-gi rule set you can think of. If there's a major no-gi rule set, I've done it. For my personal preference, if you asked me what rule set do I think I would do best in against anyone, it would be no-gi's. It would be sub only, no time limit. So I think that best suits my personal attributes. I'm not particularly athletic. I'm not ADCC. There's a bit of an athleticism ceiling, a threshold you have to meet. And I'm working very intensely on my strength and conditioning nowadays, more so than I ever have. I got a strength and conditioning coach recently. I'm working very intensely on that so that I can meet that athletic threshold. But no time limit sub only, man, the athletic threshold's way lower because it's really the only thing that matters is your skill on the mat. You take me down, it's irrelevant. Even if you pass somebody's guard, it's irrelevant. It's all about, obviously, getting to that sub. And athleticism is less important. So, I think that's probably the best rule set for me if my only goal was to win. But I'd rather watch ADCC because sub only, no time limit, man, those matches are brutal. I had one that went an hour and a half before I finally got the heel hook. And then I had another one that went 45 minutes before I triangled the guy after 45 minutes. And I'm going to be honest, I have never rewatched either of those matches. And they're my matches, you know what I mean? I don't want to sit through that. So ADCC is definitely my favorite rule set to watch. But I like, everything. I like sub only with decisions like Polaris and Grapple Fest. Those are great matches.
I like those as well.
Yeah,
because I think honestly, personally, I find the biggest knock on submission only is kind of what you said, where it's you watch, it's hey, I had an hour and a half match, and that sounds cool on paper. Where it's you grappled somebody for an hour and a half, where probably out of those 90 minutes, you were probably actually physically exerting yourself for maybe 5 minutes, if I had to guess.
Yeah, there's a lot of those matches. There's a lot of pacing where people are not. Yeah. It's funny because that match. The first 30 minutes, I would say, were the most intense. Where the guy I was going against, he was really coming after me. Like the guy was very strong, athletic, like pressure passer. And man, he was coming after me for the first 30. The first 30 was very brutal. And then after the first 30, I kind of weathered the storm, and him and I kind of got into this period of like, like we were like, okay, let's not.
Let's go get a water break. We'll come back. Keep going.
And so like he passed my guard at one point around like the 45-minute mark, and I was just lying there like, okay, I want to take a breather. And like eventually, like I said, I got it with the heel hook, but it was an hour and a half. It was really brutal. And I think like the best sub only matches are kind of matches where the guys are just attacking each other. And that sometimes the rule set doesn't necessarily encourage that, but it happens anyway. Two guys will go after each other. And it's like, did the rule set make them do this, or did they just do this because they felt like doing it anyway? Right. So like a good match is Jeremy Paul Skinner versus my teammate, Frank Rosenthal. That's an awesome match. Those guys are trying to rip each other's heads off. I've seen that match many times. I love rewatching it. And the question is like, well, Grapple Fest does encourage it because like they really reward submission attacks, but some other submission only rule sets you're like, yeah, are they encouraging them to attack? I don't know. You watch some like, did you guys see Oliver Taz's match against Pedro Hosha last? I think it was. Well, I don't know what the time zone, but like it was not that long ago.
Aaron, did you see
like last week?
I think it was like last night or the other night, something like that. But Pedro just stalled against. Everybody does this against Taza. It's awful. Like they like stall against him, and then it's like, it's awful. And then he got the decision win, Pedro, and it's like, I hate that. I hate that so much. Like that's the worst thing in our sport is stalling. It's the worst. It's the worst thing. It's so bad.
How do you discourage stalling? Like either with the rule sets. I mean, I think regardless, like some people, it's just. I think you mentioned it. Like people have that style of jiu-jitsu where they're just going to attack. And some people are going to, they're going to try to, if you want to say play it smart, they're going to play it smart, or they're going to, play by the rule set. But how do you best encourage a rule set that, I guess creates the most action and is going to get the most people watching and excited to, actually watch jiu-jitsu and not, a 5-hour sub only that I think Aaron did one in Syracuse one year. And
that was in Webster, New York. I remember
Webster, New York. Shout out to Webster, New York. All 5 people that live there.
Yeah. It was this U.S. grappling, I think it was. That was years ago. Fuck, I don't remember now.
Oh shit, nice. Yeah, I know nothing about. I've never even been upstate New York. Ultimately, there's 3 main ways to solve the problem of stalling. 2 involve rule set adjustments, and 1 is more of like a strategy adjustment on your part, the part of the athlete. Okay, so the first thing is we can try to construct a rule set which encourages action. Okay, now. Oh, wait, he's back.
I'm back now. Sorry.
Stop distracting him.
Okay, anyway. So like anyone watching, we're doing this on 2 different continents, so cut us a break. But anyway, so
it's all good.
Yeah. So okay. So the first way is to develop a rule set which encourages action. And I'm going to be honest, that's hard to do. To me, that was the strategy which appealed to me the most. And what I thought the most about, like, how do we do this? How do we construct a rule set which actively encourages engagement? It's really hard to do because let me contrast grappling as a sport with tennis. Okay. On a mechanical level, engagement is required in tennis. Otherwise, guess what's going to happen? The ball's going to fucking, you're not going to hit the ball back. You know what I mean? Yeah. You have to engage. There's no way to compete without engaging. Jiu-jitsu or grappling, that's not really actually true. You can compete and not be engaging. So I think it's really hard to make a rule set which forces engagement. The second way to think about solving it is what like wrestling does or what MMA does, which is you have a ref an official who's going to be on top of the athletes being like, listen guys, we have to engage. In wrestling, there's heavy penalties for lack of engagement. If you disengage in wrestling, you get punished. In Pride in Japan back in the day, you would lose money. So like you have that's a strong encouragement to engage. The ref pushing the action. Now that's I think the most sensible way in jiu-jitsu we could do it. The trouble is this is the real difficulty because we have so many different rule sets in grappling, in no-gi grappling. basically they're all different sports. Who's going to be a good ref for one rule set may not necessarily be the best ref for another rule set. So, and smart athletes will exploit this, right? I'll talk about myself for a second. I'm not going to say when I did this, but I've had matches where I knew the ref was an idiot and I got away with stuff that I shouldn't have gotten away with. Like we reset in the middle and I was like, oh yeah, I had this actually. And the ref just like,
okay, sure.
Yeah.
Was I refing? I've refed a lot of IBJJF. I've done a lot of I have a lot of refereeing experience. You never know. I could have refed you at some point.
Maybe it's possible. I haven't done that much IBJJF. I actually only did one in the last couple of years. I got DQ'd for doing a knee bar. I thought it was legal. Didn't know.
Were you a purple belt at the time, or?
I was a purple belt. This was a couple of years ago. Yeah, I got DQ'd.
I'll do it.
Yeah, 10 seconds. I went for a knee bar like right off the bat, and
they're looking at you like stone faced, like.
Well, as soon as he said paro, I was like, "Oh, that was illegal, I guess." But so the last strategy to overcome stalling, this is the one I'm thinking the most about these days, is you got to just, as the athlete in the match, you've got to accept that stalling is going to happen, and you've got to find ways to attack him no matter what he does. You've got to find ways to proactively engage the guy that he can't just stop by running away. You know what I mean? So in my opinion, what that means most of the time is taking the guy down. You know, he can't stall. It's harder to stall if you're putting him on his ass. If you're putting the man on his ass, you're breaking him down to his hips. It's hard for him to stall. What happens when you do that is then you start getting a game of, you're either going to put him down, and now guess what? You could pass his guard, you could take his back, all sorts of things. Or to stop that, he's going to come after you. He doesn't want to get taken down, so guess what? He's got to come after you. Now you can start playing your guard, right? So I'm thinking a lot about takedowns these days, because I think that that's ultimately the best way to stop stalling. You know what I mean? It sucks that that's a problem. It sucks that stalling is such a big problem in our sport, but it is. And so I've thought a lot about this, and I think takedowns are the best way to stop it. You know, and I've scored, believe it or not, I have scored a few takedowns, not many, but I have scored some, and I've scored them since now I've been working on it more intensely, because I realized like it's the only way to stop these guys from stalling. If you sit on your back and you consistently just try to play guard the whole time, so it'll work against a lot of people. If people attack you, then now you're having a real jiu-jitsu match, and it'll work then. But man, we've all seen matches where the guy's just running away and you're like, bro, what do you like? Let's do jiu-jitsu, you know, and the ref should be punishing that, but he's not, you know. Anyway, also let me briefly comment. I apologize about the weird lighting.
Are you in a strip club right now, or
no? This room that I'm in, the lighting is like it's so weird. It goes on and off constantly, and I don't.
Oh, okay. I thought it was like the camera or something like that. So it's the lighting.
No, it's the actual room. I don't know how to
mood stop lighting. He's got a tall glass of Chardonnay on the bench.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm used to it by now. But yeah. Anyway, so yeah, so that's how I think about stalling, and I wish that we had more structural change in the sport where refs would like stop it from happening, but. You can't count on that as the athlete. Yeah. You can't. So you got to come up with ways to go after the guy, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think you nailed it. I think it's a combination of the rule set, a referee being proactive in not allowing, combatants to stall. And I think the biggest thing is like the onus is on, you to, press the action and basically don't let the other guy stall and put you in those positions.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah.
So when you kind of look at like the evolution of like, how there's always been these transitions of like where the sport is going. So like, for example, like at one point it was the berimbolo, and then one point now it's kind of like the leg lock game is like the perennial thing right now. Like, where do you kind of see that next transition going into? Is it more like, okay, more evolution into the leg game, or is it kind of transitioning more into that wrestling style or takedowns, like you were saying, to kind of change the rule set? Or is it something we're kind of like haven't even seen yet?
I think wrestling is going to play a big part in the future of competitive no-gi because ADCC is pretty much, everybody agrees this is the most important tournament, ADCC. That's what we're all trying to win. So ADCC heavily encourages wrestling. Now, what I suspect is going to happen down the line is that people are going to start to realize that the integration of wrestling with leg locks is, I think, in fact, one of the best ways to go about operating in Nogi. When you can combine effective takedowns with your leg lock attacks, these are, in my opinion, probably the most viable initial weapons, like from the outset of a match, right? Like, so if I want to arm lock somebody, it requires them to do one of two things. Either they have to come really low towards my guard, which definitely happens, or I have to take them down and pass their guard. That definitely happens, but the opportunities they're less prevalent than opportunities for leg locks and takedowns. Leg locks are pretty much available all over the place. You don't have to pass somebody's guard. Passing good people's guards is really hard. So it's right in front of you. And when you're playing guard, whether they're kneeling or they're standing, the leg locks are there. If they're standing, you're trying to arm lock them. That's a tall order. That's really hard to do. Similarly, takedowns, you could take a guy down when he's kneeling. You can take a guy down when he's standing. You could take a guy down when you're seated. You could go from a seated position into a takedown. You can go from a kneeling or a standing position into a takedown. So leg locks and wrestling, it's all over the place. Now, when you connect these things, they connect really well, because if you think about it, look, the wrestling is going forward and the leg locks is going back. So you create pressure in both directions, really opens things up. So I think probably the next evolution is going to be the refinement of wrestling with submissions, especially, though definitely not exclusively, leg locks. In my opinion, the best in the world at this at the moment is Gary Tonin. Nobody does a better job of sequencing between submission attacks and takedowns than him. If you watch his matches with Husama Palhares or Renato Canuto or Dante Leon, these are just, or his Davi Ramos match, actually, the recent one. These are all amazing displays of he's integrating leg locks with wrestling. And obviously there's a preference for one over the other dependent on the rule set. In the Palhares match, that's sub only, so he's doing more leg locks, though there are still some takedowns. In the Renato Canuto match, there's more wrestling takedowns, because it's, if you take the guy down, there's points, you know what I mean? Whereas if you go for a leg lock, there's no points. You get the submission, but there's no points. So but you still see both in both places, and I think that's going to be a big part of the developing meta. But right now, the wrestling level in jiu-jitsu is so shit, but that needs to catch up first. And I'm included in that. I'm dog shit at it. I got to get there too. So yeah.
I think I'm like a -5 stripe white belt in wrestling.
It's hard. It's tough, because I think the big thing about wrestling is, like, people don't look at it in a systematic way. What they do is, and it's what we used to do with jiu-jitsu, right? We used to just take a bunch of techniques, like, oh, let's go do jiu-jitsu now, right? Now people realize a system is a much stronger way to go about achieving your goals. And I think people got to do that in wrestling more. Right now, when people think of wrestling, they just go, oh, I'm just going to practice my double legs. Okay, what's your setup though? What happens when that doesn't work? What do you train into? Blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? That's what has to be refined. The truly great wrestlers, if you watch like internationally successful wrestlers at the World Championship, at the Olympics, they're like chaining like 7 moves together. There's so much setup, and there's so many like bang, 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 bang. So you very rarely see like one just like a blast double and they just take them down, right? Like freak athletes like Jordan Burroughs are successful with that, but most guys, that doesn't really happen. So that's got to change in jiu-jitsu. Right now, wrestling in jiu-jitsu is like about like just shooting blast doubles and stuff. Yeah.
Like it's like throwing like just a jab like 900 times, basically. Like using like a boxing analogy. Like you got to learn some other punches, and you got to learn, the combinations with them as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yes.
I want to ask you, like, influences like in your jiu-jitsu, like, is there people that like, besides like your teammates, are there like other jiu-jitsu people that you're studying? Like, are you watching like competition footage, DVDs, anything, or like, are you studying other people's systems? Like, who are some influences on your game?
I mean, I watch a lot. Like if you name somebody, if they're notable, I've probably studied them. And even people that aren't super notable, like I watch like a ton, I would say my favorite person who's not on my team to watch is probably Masakazu Imanari. I've watched pretty much every single one of his fights that I can find. Some of them you just can't find. They're so old, but anyone that I can find, I watch, and I have them all saved on my hard drive. And I've learned so much from that guy. That guy was so creative and so innovative at a time period when people just weren't doing this stuff. The first time I ever saw backside 50-50 being used was Imanari. The first time I ever saw cross ashi being used was Imanari. The first time I ever saw like a deep half entry into an outside ashi was Imanari. There's just so many things. And it's crazy. What's wild about Imanari is that like he was doing this before like anybody else was doing it. And I think what held him back, my guess, is that he didn't have other people to bounce ideas off of, because he was doing it at a time when other people weren't doing it. So that guy was so ahead of his time. I love watching him, but I could list like a ton of people like Cobrinha. I love Cobrinha's another guy. Mm-hmm. Genius, a literal genius. His guard passing, his sweeps, his takedowns, his back takes, like works of art. You know, I love that, watching that guy. But I mean, honestly, like if I study like a lot of people, mainly lighter weight guys. I watch bigger guys. Like I actually was watching a lot of Cyborg's matches recently. I think Cyborg is actually, of the bigger guys, I think he's one of the more technical ones. He's got a lot of really good stuff. You know, I prefer watching smaller people because usually they tend to be more technical, but like I try to watch everybody because you never know what you're going to find. I even watch I have he's a really obscure like interest that I have. I love watching the Indian guys. The Indian community is super interesting to me. Like those guys are like, I've been to India and I taught a seminar there, and I got to meet a lot of these guys, and the community there is really small, but they're like they're very ambitious. They're like, it's so impressive to me how hard these guys are working in like complete isolation. They're in the middle of nowhere in the world of jiu-jitsu. They don't have access to foreign coaches. I was there. So when I went there, I was like one of the two only foreign guys they ever brought in. They had Yuri Samoish and they had me. Those were the only two guys that were foreign that ever got brought in. And so they're mainly homegrown. And they've been hosting a lot of tournaments lately, and they've been putting them on YouTube. Like shout out to these guys. If anybody's interested, check out the Leverage Radio tournament. It was awesome. I've been rewatching those matches. They're fucking awesome. Nobody has ever heard of these guys, but I'm telling you, they're fucking good. They're developing. Don't expect like Rafa Mendes level skill yet, guys. But it's really cool to see the development of a community of guys who are very committed to learning. And man, there's very creative stuff happening, you know? So like, that's like an obscure one that I like to watch, but like, man, I just love grappling, and I watch a lot, you know, like after we're done talking, I'm going to watch the 2016 Combat Wrestling Championship in Japan. It's 3 hours, and I'm going to try to get through the whole thing today. And I've watched bits and pieces, but I want to watch the whole thing, which I just downloaded. And that's really awesome because those guys it's a very unique rule set. It's like basically catch wrestling, and like, so there's a lot of cool stuff to be gained from them. So yeah, like anything.
Awesome. So like when you kind of look at like, especially like whether it's matches for yourself or like matches that you kind of want to see, like what's on the top of the wish list for you?
I want to see, I watch matches, like what interests me is not like exciting stuff. I'm interested in watching matches in the way like a scientist is interested in surveying data. I'm just trying to like analyze what works and what doesn't. I get excited by like small things like, oh, look, it works. Oh, that's interesting. I saw this in another match. Why did it work there? Why did it not work there? There's so many different variables because like you've got different body types, right? Like this changes things quite a lot. So you can't like make a broad statement across the board and say it always applies. Like, oh, it worked there, so it'll always work, right? So we're always factoring in so many different things. So it's just, for me, it's about like the way I look at it is like accumulating data. I'm trying to accumulate data, and I keep so I have a couple notebooks, and I'm always writing down. So I'll put at the top of the page, I'll put the name of like a situation. Like here's an example. I've been watching a lot of double far hip ashi stuff. I'll put double far hip ashi examples. And then every time I see one in a match, I'll go, oh, okay, I'll write that down. I'll write the name of the match. And sometimes I'll timestamp it. I'll say like this point in the match, right? And then when I have enough, let's say I've got 50 examples, I'll take all those examples, I'll put it in a single file, I'll make a video, I'll cut it all up, I'll make it like 30 minutes long, and then I'll watch it again and again and again, and I'll try to notice patterns, and I'll say, oh, okay, That's not working. These guys keep trying that. That's not working. That's not good. You shouldn't do that. And then I'll test stuff out. Right now, I can't test stuff out because I'm isolated. But when I'm able to train, I'll test stuff out on training partners. I'll say, all right, let's positionally try stuff. Let's put ourselves in these situations and test it out. So that's what I'm looking for. It's funny. Like I remember when ADCC 2019 was on, I was watching it live, and I actually didn't really enjoy it as like a sports viewing experience, because I felt like, this is going to sound funny maybe, I felt like anxious, being like, I don't have time to like, when I'm watching it, it's all happening so fast and I'm not like able to like study it. It's happening too fast. So I was like, I want to go back and rewatch it. Like what happened there? What happened there? So I actually didn't really enjoy it until after the event had ended. I actually turned it off when the finals started. I was like, I'll just watch it later, because I wasn't really enjoying it.
I'm spent. I'm done. I need a cigarette.
Yeah.
too much jiu-jitsu. But I get what you're saying, because like there's so many crazy like world-class matchups that are happening. It's like Mat 1, there's like, you know, Buchecha and Cyborg are fighting, and it's like Gordon Ryan's fighting like Hulk on another mat, and it's so much to track at the same time. Like, it's impossible to watch live. You almost have to take each match and break it down one by one later on.
Yeah, I wish they would do is, after the fact, take every bracket and just have like on Flograppling have like 66 kg. And then you clicked on that. And what it did is it started with the bracket, and then it shows you the match, you watch the match, and then you see the guy advance on the bracket. Then it went to the next one, but they don't have that. You have to do that yourself. So it's like, it's not always easy to watch it in that way if you want to. The old ADCCs on Fight Pass actually do that. So like the first couple, like 1998, 1999, and 2000, they have those things. And the brackets are way, some of them are smaller. So it's like, it's easier to do that, I guess. But regardless, I wish they did that, but they don't.
Awesome. I want another thing to a topic that we always like to talk about with people, especially like since you've been working in jiu-jitsu, you're like a full-time instructor. What's some advice that you would give to somebody who's like maybe like a blue belt or a purple belt right now, and they're like, you know, I want to do jiu-jitsu for a living. How do I make that happen? Like, any advice that you would give them?
Yeah. First of all, ask yourself, why do you want to do it? That's the single biggest thing I would say to somebody, because in my opinion, if you want to do it, there's two big reasons to want to do this professionally. The first is that you love it. It's just, you love it. Right. And there are many reasons for loving it, but I think they're all like valid. As long as you love it, that's the right reason for doing it. The other reason for doing it is that you want to look cool on Instagram. Yeah, and I think that you will get I personally think that's the wrong reason to be doing it. And I think that if you want to just look cool on Instagram, I think you will not make it. And I think that you shouldn't do it. You should keep it as a hobby then. But that's just my opinion. You can tell me to fuck off and do it anyway. And if you're winning, I can't say shit. But after that, if you've committed to it, you're like, okay, I want to fucking do this. Fuck you, Rob Degle. I want to do this.
Fuck you, Aaron Gall. I want to do this, you fucking piece of shit.
I keep telling you, Mike, if you want to do it, do it. Okay.
You want to do it? Don't fucking tell me what to do. Don't censor my ad reads, fucker.
So, like, if you've decided you really want to do it, I would say you've got to really commit to it, which I think means finding a team where you could take it. Like, too many people try too fast to start like making money off the sport. You know, you've got to develop first. You know, I think you ought to get with a big team, or at least a good team, right? Move to Puerto Rico and train with Danaher now. You can't do it yet because they haven't opened the school yet, but when they do, fucking move to Puerto Rico. It's cheap as shit. Go train with Danaher. Move to California. There's a ton of big gyms out there. Move to like wherever else. I don't know. There's a ton of good teams. Get with a good team. Get with the best team that you can realistically get to, right? If you're in the UK, go train with Ross Nichols in London, you know, etc. Do something like that. You want to train with a really good team because you want to get to a high level, because that's what's ultimately going to, in my opinion, if you want to have a career in this sport, you got to be as good as you can. So you want to spend a long time developing. And I mean, a lot of it depends on your goals. If you just want to open a small academy and just run it like that, that's fine. You don't need to train with a big team whatsoever. So, but I guess I'm kind of thinking about if you're trying to be like a competitor first and then a coach down the line, that would be my advice. I get DMs from young kids all the time where they ask me this exact question. And I always tell them, like, I got a DM from a kid who lives in Cyprus. And he's like, I'm already kind of the best guy on the island. And like, I don't know, I want to win Adcc someday. The kid was like 17. And I just gave him what, in my opinion, is the honest advice. You're not going to do it in Cyprus. I'm sorry. It's not going to happen. There's no team there for you. You might come back in 10 years and make that team, but right now it's not there. It doesn't exist yet. So what you got to do is you got to get to a place where you can train with a team that'll get you to that level. I said, look, you're 17. You live in an EU country. Why don't UK is not EU anymore? But when I gave this advice, it was I think they were leaving EU. I don't remember. But I told them, I was like, look, go to London. You got to go to college, right? The kid was going. I always recommend young people who are interested in jiu-jitsu go to college too. I think you should have a backup plan. You know what I mean? Like, but anyway, so I said go to school in London and train with Ross Nichols' team. That's a very solid team. I've trained with them on both of my trips to the UK. I think they're a very solid team. Ton of very tough athletes, and you can get to a high level with those guys. They're very good. So go there, go train with those guys, and you will get to a high level if you train hard, you train right? That's what you need as a young athlete. That's so here in Singapore, my big goal is I want to develop a team develop a team like that. For one, first of all, I'm not done competing. I want, for a selfish reason, I want students who are good, who can come after me so I can get to where I want to get. And the second reason is I want a tough team because of, you guys ever hear that corny expression, a rising tide raises all sails, right? That's how I view it, So I was talking to a student who's going to be training under me. And he said, I'm like a 38-year-old hobbyist. I don't have competitive goals. He goes, should I still come to your classes? And I was like, absolutely. I was like, if you are smart and you pick up the techniques, it doesn't matter how old you are, you will be a useful training partner for the younger competitors. You don't need, not everyone needs to compete. Not everyone should fucking compete. You know what I mean? But no matter who you are, you have a place, as long as you're coming to train and you're focused and you're serious, everybody has a place in the training room. Everybody, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Jiu-jitsu, it's funny. I've heard people say jiu-jitsu is for everybody. I don't think that's true. It's not for everybody, but it can be for anybody. You guys get what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So when you kind of I want to ask you, especially because especially places of they've had to go to other places to train and all that kind of jazz. And especially if you even look at let's take New York State, for example, for now, right? A lot of those clubs have been shut down or they can't train at all. And people have had to move, for example. Do you see because again, New York used to be a big hub of a lot of jiu-jitsu academies, right? The same thing that San Diego, California. Do you feel like those clubs are going to come back, or there's going to be a long transition time before they can do that?
Nah, they're going to come back. I don't think there will be any long-term residual effects. I don't think it's going to matter. People have been training. Whether it's been legal or not. Yeah. I never stopped training. I started training a week after Henzo's ended. It never ended. We were just training in garages and basements and wherever we could. So I don't think it's gonna matter. I know my buddies, and talking to some of my buddies in the UK, their gyms are closed. They've been closed since June, which is fucking brutal. Awful. And they've been training in backyards, so it's not gonna stop people. If you're focused, if you're committed, you'll find a way. Yeah.
It's funny because I've never thought I would live to see the day where we're in Canada and marijuana is legal. Doing jiu-jitsu is not. I thought I would never see the day where that would happen.
Yeah, it sucks, man. Isn't your government very anti-jiu-jitsu? It's illegal in Quebec to have tournaments, right?
Well, yeah, that's a whole other issue. That's more, but it's all political and money based, right? I don't think it even has anything to do with jiu-jitsu and safety. Yeah. It's all about who's making the money in their federation. And that's the only reason why.
It's really screwed up and crooked, honestly.
Yeah.
Where like I think it basically started with two kind of like it basically started more with like MMA promotions, and then it leaked, and then like jiu-jitsu got like thrown into it as well, where it's like, oh well, you can't have prize fighting, and somehow jiu-jitsu got linked into that because like we're all prize fighters here.
Yeah, I didn't know I should have been getting paid all those competitions. Like,
yeah, it's ridiculous. But we wanted to ask you before we wrap up this evening, what's going on in New York City with some of the things that are going on there
with Andrew Cuomo?
Some of that guy.
So New York City politics have a long history of being run by like actual gangsters. And,
it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I don't think Andrew Cuomo is. I don't think he's anything new, to be honest. Dude. The guy was found threatening another Democratic lawmaker. He was like on the phone. He said like, if you don't cover up. So there was a whole scandal about the cover up of like COVID deaths that Cuomo. I don't think he did it deliberately. Cuomo sent people back into nursing homes, which he shouldn't have done. But I don't think it was like a deliberate attempt to kill people. But what was fucked up is he covered it up. He covered up that he did it. He covered up the deaths, and it's like, bro, you can't do that. I'm pretty sure that's illegal. And then I'm not a legal expert, but I would guess it is. And this other Democratic lawmaker was like, he was basically threatened by Cuomo. He's like, I will destroy your career. And I don't know if you guys know, there is a hilarious back and forth between our mayor, Bill de Blasio, and our governor, Andrew Cuomo, where they're both Democrats, but they hate each other. So like they're always taking shit. Like, yeah, like it's so petty. Like I forget who did what, but like one of them wanted to open up New York City schools. I think it was Bill de Blasio. He wanted to open up New York City schools. And he said, we're opening up New York City schools. Andrew Cuomo the next day was like, we're not opening up New York City schools. And it's like they're just going after each other. Like and Cuomo is he's just very clearly crooked, but I do not personally, I hope something happens, but I don't think anything will happen. I don't think anything's going to happen. Cuomo's going to go on his stupid, conversations with his brother on TV. His brother's a CNN anchor.
I think he's actually banned from doing that now.
They banned him. Yeah,
they actually banned him,
nice.
So he's not allowed to talk to his brother because how biased is that? Like you can't like. Yes. It's like me doing like it's like Aaron like doing like a political interview with me. It's like, come on. Yeah. So Mike, what is your platform for getting out of COVID in Canada?
Yeah. Like if anyone is listening to this and if anyone is interested in New York City political history, I don't know why anyone would know that. If you're interested, like if you look up like Boss Tweed and like the early like that's like in the 20s and stuff, and like he was like a crooked guy that all New York City politicians had to like work with. Like I don't really think New York City politics has changed that much. Whereas like there's a lot of like crookedness, and I think Cuomo is he's just a continuation of that. And like it's personally, from my perspective, it's been hilarious to watch because like everybody knows in New York. I've never met anyone in New York that actually likes the guy. Like nobody likes Andrew Cuomo.
Like, how is this guy here?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, and I've loved watching this, just the downfall of him. But like, I don't know if anything will actually happen. But yeah, so we'll see.
Well, he won an Emmy and he beat COVID apparently. So
the guy wrote a book. This guy is this is insane to me. He wrote a book about how well he handled the COVID crisis while he was simultaneously involved with the cover up of COVID deaths. That's like if you're like a little kid and like you like fucking destroy something in the living room before your mom gets home, and then you write like a letter to your mom about how good a job you did taking care of the house. Like no, actually you didn't. Like
it's a good analogy. That's a really good analogy, actually. I like that.
It's like saying like I did a really bad job taking care of the house. I burned it down, but I did a really good job of putting out the fire.
Yeah.
Did a really good job of that. So we usually talk about Canadian cities, but I'm gonna mention American ones with you. What is the I wouldn't say your least favorite, but what's the worst city in the United States that you've been to, and why is it East St. Louis?
I don't want to say the worst because I have a worse city, but I don't want to shit on it. I feel bad. I mainly disliked it because I was just being negative that weekend, so I don't want to roast
it. Totally fair. Totally fair.
Yeah, sorry.
So
it's a lame answer, I know.
So it's East St. Louis then. Okay.
I've never been to Missouri, so I have no idea. That's in Missouri, right?
Don't go there.
Okay,
yeah.
I won't.
Don't go in there.
I never had any intention to, so yeah.
Me and Aaron have had a mutual friend who's lived in St. Louis, and he's like, yeah, when you leave St. Louis, when you leave downtown, you go home and lock your windows and you just take off, and hopefully you don't catch a stray bullet on the way home.
Oh my god! Yeah, I definitely won't go there now.
and then they're even worse. That's downtown St. Louis. East St. Louis, they actually have police officers on a bridge on the weekend to make sure you don't go there. They're like, no, go back. Why are you coming here? Turn the fuck around. Get out of here. So,
do you have experience with this? It sounds like you've been there.
Personally, no. I've been to Washington, D.C., though, and I've had some experience there, to say the least, where I'm driving in and, it's kind of like the old Dave Chappelle bit where, you're in the hood when you see a fucking baby on the corner at like 2 a.m. I literally saw a fucking baby on the corner at 2 a.m. I'm like, where the fuck am I? I'm in a war zone. There's like barbed wire like on my motel.
What was he doing? It was just a baby by himself, just like on the sidewalk?
Yeah, it was like a family just out for a walk. It was like the middle of the night.
Okay. I thought it was like just a child, like on his own.
The Dave Chappelle bit's like, there's just a baby just chilling on the corner. It's like,
I have seen that. That's good. Yeah.
They're just in the middle of the hood.
Yeah. Jesus.
Well, Rob, I do want to thank you very much for jumping on the podcast with us today and taking the time. We do appreciate it.
Worries.
Is there anybody you want to shout out or sponsorships you want to shout out before we tag it off?
Not really. No. Unfortunately, don't have any current sponsors. I've had some offers, but they weren't very good. So I don't have any current sponsors.
Sponsored by nobody. All y'all suck.
If anybody wants to sponsor me, DM me. But like, just know, like, if it's a terrible offer, I'm not going to do it. Like, some of these offers are like, you guys wouldn't even believe it. You're like, you want me to do what for what? Like, no. Like, I need money. Like,
it's kind of like us at our sponsorship end. It's like, yeah, kind of like, I have a kid to feed, so
yes. Yeah.
Cash works in all ways, but I get it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cash rules everything around me. Get the cream, dollar bills, y'all.
There you go. It's something to live life by. But yeah, thanks for having me on, guys.
No, thank you so much for jumping on. We wish you all the best, especially out there. And I hope to have you on soon, especially after maybe we get out of COVID and all this situational shit, and then we can figure out other stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Anytime you guys want to have me on, I'm definitely down. Thanks for having me.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, my man.
Appreciate you coming on tonight or morning or afternoon or wherever you are listening to this right now.
See you guys. Thanks again.
Thanks.